Once upon a time, Vicky was trapped by the curse of her thoughts. It had her believing she was powerless, imperfect, and weak. Then one day, the curse started to lessen, and Vicky could see a little clearer. As each day passed, her thoughts improved until she broke free. She then began creating magic in her life. Now, Vicky is getting ready to marry her Prince Charming. This is her manifesting success story. Hello and welcome to this episode. I am your host, Cassie Parks, and I am back with Vicky. And today we are talking about how to manifest a job. And Vicky's going to walk us through her story of manifesting her new job where she makes more money and works less. So welcome, Vicky.
Thank you for having me. That's hilarious. I forgot to include that in the questions.
I didn't know if it was in the questions. I was just like, this is the highlight, right? This is what everybody wants. You want to make more money in less time. And that is what you did. You manifested that. And very, it wasn't hard to manifest, but you thoughtfully manifested that or consciously manifested that. I don't want to say diligently because I don't think you were like, diligent sort of means white knuckling and you weren't doing that.
No, it was like intentional. Once the space opened up, I was like, I did a lot of, I am choosing to do, I am choosing to leave the space. I am choosing to stay open. I am choosing to only look when it feels good. And I'm choosing to kind of wait for the best job.
Yes, I love it. All right. So, and this all started when you were sort of fired from a job, which I'm going to let you tell the story. And then I'm going to tell like the coaching, like the other side, sort of LOA, what I think happened, but you tell us what happened.
So I was nannying and I had been struggling for a long time with that job. Like I was always coming to you for coaching for that job. And it got real bad for the last like year of that job. And it just got to a point where I just could not make it work. And even with all the coaching from you, I just like could not navigate or like manifest my way through those things. None of it was working.
Yeah. And so why do you think it never was like, I should just get a new job?
I think I had a story that I could, we were just talking on the birthday episode, how I was like, I am a powerful manifester. I can manifest my way out of anything, you know, or like I was forced telling myself this story that like, I can make the best of everything or something. I think that was sort of how I felt going into this job.
Yeah, which I think we can and is an important distinction for manifestors. You know, I remember when I very clearly learned this lesson, like I could do all these things and I wouldn't say it was leveraging LOA at the time, but I was definitely forcing. And you can force with LOA too. You can be like, you know, forcing, right? Like I can make the best of any situation instead of just exiting the situation and going somewhere better, right? Like there are two choices. And when we realize that, like I can make the best of this situation or I can exit to a better situation. And for me, it was like this point in my life, I was in my early 20s and I was bending over backwards to try and get people to, it was a coaching job, like a softball coaching job. And like, trying to appease this group of people that the further I get away, then like I know so much of like it was mostly who I was, like mostly that I wanted to empower girls and women. Like that wasn't even though I was a girls softball coach, that was not the thing that they wanted to happen. But you know, it really occurred to me one day, like they had always asked me to come back to the state championship team, but I had always stayed like with this team and loyal to these girls. And I'm like, the better team wants you. Like, why are you staying here trying to convince these people? Like, go where you're loved, go where you're wanted, go where they value what you do instead of trying to make this situation. And so I think that was true for you, right? You're like, oh, well, I'm really good at this. I should be able to fix this situation with manifesting. I've been doing this for 4 years, right? I've manifested all this other great stuff. I should be able to fix this. Or this is something that I'm doing, like I'm doing wrong and I should fix myself rather than just go somewhere else.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I really felt like because a similar pattern had happened in my last job, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I need to like I am the common denominator here. I need to look inward and fix what's happening inside me, or not fix, but stop this pattern. And I thought the way to stop this pattern was to fix it like within the job. But looking back, the way to fix the or to stop the pattern was to exit the job.
Right. Like, and kind
Mhm.
of exit the field, right?
Right. Exit the field. Yeah. I'm no
Right.
longer
So
nannying.
it,
So
yeah, it like it was it the problem wasn't you, it was that you were picking nanny jobs. Or
mm-hmm.
and I mean it could be, right? It's like I'm only worth this much, but that
Mm,
experience sometimes is harder to shift if you're like in the context of like being a nanny.
mm-hmm.
If that job originally you took that job because you only had a self-worth of like I deserve to be on call all the time and do this and do that and all these
Yeah.
things, right? And be overworked and stressed and having four kids
Mm-hmm.
at me all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
if it can be harder to shift the like what you're worthy of in the similar situation in that line of
Mm-hmm.
job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, in the end, I think the reason I was able to leave that job was because I had left my partner at the time. Like I had a similar, like you and I drew parallels between my previous relationship and my work relationship with my boss. And that was helpful to realize too, that
Yeah,
like,
tell us a couple of those. Do you remember them?
yeah, it was like my biggest issue with my previous boss was I felt she had a very severe lack of compassion for me. And looking back now, I see it was a lot to do with her job and her projecting onto me. And she and I have made up and we're good friends now. But like at the time, she had no space or capability of showing me any compassion for my experiences within that house. And I'm not talking like major things. It was things like I didn't want the dog to jump on me when I walked in the door. And I got a lot of like kind of huffs and eye rolls at that, for me. And a lot of that same crap happened with my ex. He had no compassion or flexibility in any part of the world, especially with me. And the way like he had a set idea of how things should run, and anything outside of that was wrong and dumb or whatever. It just like I see pretty big parallels between those two things, and how when I asked for things from him, I would get the eye rolls and huffs too. So it's interesting that I was in that 4-year relationship and then I started this job and there was just a little bit of overlap, and I got rid of the guy and like kept this job, and I just like tried to fix it within this job, and it just was never going to work.
Right. And I think sometimes there are things that can't be fixed because or you have to let go like in order to fix them because you mentioned like oh I made up with my boss, like
Mm-hmm.
she has shifted, so I think people can change, but I think the general temperament of your ex is like that's who he is based on
Yeah.
evidence that I've seen. But
Mm-hmm.
with her, you
Mm-hmm.
attracted that situation because that's what you were tolerating in your life. That's how you were being. And
Mm-hmm.
since then, since you have left, she is a lot more compassionate, right? She
Mm-hmm.
has a new job, which allows her the space for being compassionate and
Mm-hmm.
seeing, right? And you, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of things that she always said, like, will get done are getting done. Like she has
Mm-hmm.
changed. You just couldn't fix her because you'd attracted that thing that you were being. That thing that
Mm-hmm.
and by being, it's being the person who is willing to accept that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too that last year of me working for them, I did a lot of growth within this community,
Yeah.
and like stepping into becoming a coach, stepping into my worthiness of what I was, and I like started dating and I found Nick, and it like that opened up doors to like I like realizing what I used to tolerate, and then also what I was willing to tolerate moving forward, and like being with his exceptionally compassionate and empathetic man, and then seeing like coming into a place where I was being shown none of that. It like that juxtaposition was it just made it like this job had become this giant thorn, and there was no fixing it. Like it just needed to come out so that I could fix it, or like
Yeah.
so that I could move forward.
Yeah, it didn't fit
Yeah.
anymore, right? Which
Didn't
is
fit.
why I think you couldn't see that on your own. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I could have probably said, like, Vicky, why don't you just quit your job? And the whole, like, there was all this stuff about why all these stories about why you couldn't, right?
Right.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so that was never a coaching. Like, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a choice, or what do you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Because if I had said, like, Vicky, just quit this job, what do you think your reaction would be?
I still would have been like, I need to fix this pattern. I don't want this pattern to continue because in my mind, the only way the pattern would quote unquote stop or get fixed is by fixing it within the job. And now
Mm-hmm.
I see that's not the case.
Mm-mm.
Like a square peg in a round hole just aren't going to work.
Aren't going to work. And once
Right.
you've become the square peg, you can no
Mm-hmm.
longer get back in that round hole, right? And
Right.
that's what it is you had become this other person.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and really she needed you to leave too for her, probably for her to break open the space for this new job that
Yeah.
she has, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
she had got it was her pattern too, but she got
Mm-hmm.
locked in this pattern. So
Mm-hmm.
it was very unlikely from an energetic standpoint that she was going to attract that new job while you
Mm-hmm.
were still there, just because she
Right.
was locked in that pattern of not showing you
Mm-hmm.
compassion. And
Yeah.
had she gotten a new job, there would have been a total shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. She got that new job 2 days after I left.
that is hilarious.
Right. I
Oh
know.
my gosh, that it's so like when you can really see the energetics of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say it in the clearest words of like, Vicky, you could just quit your job, but there was
Mm-hmm.
something, and I remember you being like, nope, I got to fix it. And I'm like, all right, the opening is
Mm-hmm.
not there. But I
Right.
think that friction of not realizing I don't belong here anymore, like, is what
Mm.
creates like essentially like the firing,
Yeah.
right? Like you
Yeah.
created a situation where like it could no longer, it just all she needed out, you needed out, and it had to
Mm-hmm.
break, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, oh, it was just a break that you
Mm-hmm.
weren't able to see to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because this, like, it all came to a big head at one point, I was on vacation with them and I didn't like have time to prepare or like talk to you about what I'm going to say, how am I going to handle it, yada, yada. I had to just be really present in the moment when she was straight up like, are you happy working for us anymore? And I said, I like, there was no other answer except for no. Like, I am unhappy working here. And that was that. Like there was no other conversation to be had after that. Like it just was like,
It's truth,
okay.
right?
Yeah, it was the truth
Yeah.
for me. And it was crazy in the moment. Like obviously that conversation sucked. But
Mm-hmm.
like I had such a huge sense of relief when it happened. And like even though there was somewhere like it was like truly a terrible experience. Like kind of getting thrown out and sent on my way for a 3 hour drive home was like awful. I don't wish that on anyone. But like I still had this massive sense of relief that like it was over and I didn't have to try to fix it anymore. God, it just felt so good.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I get that. That's
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so what was it like when, like, after you left, after you got in that car and had to go through that experience of like, all right, well then this is the moment, we're done, right? It wasn't like, let's finish nannying this weekend. It was like, okay, you're out of here.
Well, yeah, it was like you're okay, you're out of here, but we'll see you on Monday because she still had like, her job was like non-relenting. So like I had to be there. She needed me. So I just was like, I had the rest of the weekend. I think I had all Sunday or Monday or something off. And I just did a lot of crying, like a lot of crying. And it's funny when I called my parents to tell them, they had no idea I was unhappy in that job. Like I feel like that's kind of how that's a good testament to like how much I was working towards making this a good job. Like I never complained about it to my family. I just was like, it's great, it's flexible, yada yada. Anyway,
And it was
um,
not okay. Like,
it was
as
not okay.
the people, like anyone in the Enchanted Circle knows, if they are listening, right? And like, it was not. This was a thing that was, I mean, you were trying to fix it constantly, which means it wasn't okay.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that's probably sorry, blowing my nose. I feel like that's probably a red flag for anybody. If you're fixing something constantly, then it's not,
Yes.
then it's square peg round hole. And it might not be time for you to like let go of it, but just like bring your awareness to it. I feel like that's what helped me leaving my ex, not necessarily this job, but but yeah, it was the crappy 3 hour drive home, which honestly, I was in an Uber. What do you do in a 3 hour drive with an Uber when you have to
Right?
pee? I was like, I don't want to pull over. What if you leave me here? I just was like, so I held over the whole time, and I have a very small bladder. Anyway, it was fine. And that actually worked out too better because he didn't have to drive me all the way back to Fort Collins. He just drove me to Westminster. So, and dropped me at Maggie's house. It really, like, that kind of worked. Anyway, and Nick picked me up. Oh God. And yeah, I spent the weekend crying and like doing things that were comforting, not necessarily like trying to make me feel better, but like comforting.
Yeah. Taking care of
Yeah.
yourself.
Taking care of myself. Yeah. Like walks and reading Pride and Prejudice and watching Harry Potter, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so what about the money? Like what like you got fired, like what was the money situation?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned like thinking back to coaching you had given me, like if you had said just quit, you'll be fine. I probably would have been like freaked out about dipping into my savings for a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I was essentially fired, it was like, oh, I'm okay. I have all of this savings. So, like, thank God I've been spending all these years with Enchanted Life U that I have this big enough nest egg that I was able to lean on while I was between jobs. And I had way more than enough money. Like, I essentially did not shift how I was living my life at all. Like, I was never like, oh, we can't go out to dinner. And not that I was overspending, I just like flowed and let myself go and I like flow with it, you know. I mean, I guess when I think about it, I didn't do any other spending, you know, like I did just our groceries, we got takeout occasionally, like went out to dinner once or twice, but like I wasn't like buying a bunch of stuff. So I guess like because I had spent so many years writing a money story I that is supportive of me and growing, I was able to live in the space between jobs without a paycheck very comfortably.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
and that's just so beautiful and amazing and
Yeah.
awesome because you could really just hang out, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
were looking for a job, but we were
Yeah.
kind of just hanging out and enjoying your life. And
Mm-hmm.
you were living the life that you've been creating, right?
Right. Oh, you know what? I did get pretty uncomfortable. I on some coach calls, I was um bored and antsy and I did feel uncomfortable. And the moment that it clicked for me when you is was when you reminded me, you were like, Vicky, you are actively living out the life you've been scripting for years. And I was like, oh, and I can't remember what coaching you gave me that was like getting comfortable in this space is what's going to move you forward, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And it was that coaching. And I think within a couple days, I was feeling very good and comfortable and starting to really settle into this routine at home. Um, that I found the job of that was perfect for me at the time. And then like 2 weeks later, I started taking on clients.
Yes. Amazing. All right.
Yeah.
So, um, like you talk about, we haven't talked about like sort of the holding the space. We talked about
Mm-hmm.
it in a roundabout way, but like what does that mean, like holding this space to support yourself and your next job as you are quote unquote waiting for the next job? Or and you weren't really trying there. I think there were a few moments, but you really were conscious. And actually, we'll probably go more into this in the next episode, so we can just touch
Mm-hmm.
on it a little bit. But what
Mm-hmm.
does it mean to hold the space um,
Hold For
for
me
the best fit
personally,
job? Yeah.
holding the space was not allowing myself to go down rabbit holes of scrolling for jobs, like specifically pertaining to job finding. If I had filled up the space with like a hyper fixation on getting a new job, that would not have gotten me the job the best fit job for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have been uncomfortable. It wouldn't have felt good, like getting comfortable in the space is still a little bit uncomfortable, but it was felt better than it. I've been in that headspace before where you were just like constantly like, oh my God, I have to get a job. Let me try this site. Oh, what about this site? Oh, what about this work from home job? Like you can just allow your brain to like fill up with possibilities and essentially the hows. And filling up your brain with all of that is not leaving space. And especially for me, so that was a lot of like consciously choosing, I am not going to fill up space right now. I am choosing to just be present in my house. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to go for a walk? Do I want to bake something? Do I want to go see if my friend's at home? Like very just consciously choosing, I'm not going to fill a space right now. I'm just going to sit here in the open space. And at the time, your podcast had just come out with a bunch of episodes with Polly about being present. So that was very well timed.
Yes.
So I did a lot of like walking around and like breathing and trying to notice the sounds and sights around me and being present. And I spent good chunks of every day doing that. I do remember that.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love it. All right. So next episode, we're going to talk about best fit versus perfect job. We're going to continue. We're going to give you some more. We'll wrap up the next episode with some more concrete tips. I really like to share the stories and the evolution because I think when people are trying to apply the law of attraction, so often, you think you know what you're supposed to do, but actually hearing the stories, hearing what happens gives you evidence. It opens space for you. It gives you real life examples of how to apply those things, which is why we go so much into the story on this podcast, because just starting off and giving you 5 things to do to manifest a job, I don't believe is as helpful because your brain doesn't get it as well. But hearing the story about how Vicky did it, where she was, what happened, how she technically got fired. She didn't get fired, but I think it was a little bit different. All of those things are supporting you in manifesting an amazing job or a best fit job for you. And we're going to talk more about the best fit job versus the perfect job next week. So make sure to come back and join us for that. The telling of stories is so powerful, both to the person telling it and the person receiving it. Since 30,000 BC, we as humans have told stories to teach and guide. And now we, with Manifesting Success Stories, hope to inspire you to what is possible in your own life. If you want more manifesting success, go to moremanifestingsuccess.com, where you'll find links to anything we've talked about on the show. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, you have the power to write your own happy ever after.